This scene from Hot Fuzz is brilliant.
It would appear the heavens have opened.
I was hoping to check in.
Fascist.
I beg your pardon?
System of government characterized by extreme dictatorship.
The comedy is original, but Edgar Wright is borrowing strongly from The Wicker Man. An out-of-town police officer approaches a guest house to find a place to stay.
Hello. Evening.
They are welcomed by an unnecessarily awkward and unnerving host.
Are you the landlord here?
I'm Alder McGregor, and you must be the policeman from the mainland.
Ah, that's right. Now, I'm quite obviously not going to get back to the mainland tonight, so I wanted to had a room and a bite of supper I could have.
There are many structural similarities between the two films, but the key one for this video essay is the stranger in a new community finding a place to stay. It's a common theme in stories.
Excuse me. I was looking for a place to stay.
And it's particularly popular in horror films. How many times have we seen a traveller journey to a scary-looking hotel, guest house, motel, inn, knowing that they are likely to get much more than they bargained for? Why do horror stories keep returning to the idea of hospitality gone wrong? In this video essay, I want to explore why horror loves hotels. As a caveat, let me say that I'm not especially a fan of horror.
I don't like horror movies.
But that I'm interested in storytelling and the ideas behind it. There are reasons that horror is such a popular genre, and here I want to explore one. Hospitality horror is such a strong trope that an entire animated film franchise can be built around it.
Welcome to Hotel Transylvania!
Okay, so it's an obvious thing to say, but hotels are meant to be places of rest. They provide shelter for the traveller. A hotel is a symbol for safety in the midst of struggle. Whether it's a stormy night or a long journey, the hotel is designed to provide relief. The traveller is tired and needs to sleep. They're hungry and need a meal. And because the traveller is a hero in the unknown world, they are a stranger and an alien to the place they find themselves. They're at risk. In Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 film Psycho, Marion Crane is arriving at Bates Motel during a heavy rainstorm. She's already tense and stressed, having stolen $40,000 from her job. She's on the run. But is this a good place to stop? Will she be safe? Will she face the consequences of her actions? Is Norman Bates a man to be trusted? The Bates Motel is synonymous with hospitality horror. In 1998, Anne Hesh and Vince Vaughn starred in a deeply unnecessary remake. And in 2013, a television spin-off came on to explore the mythos further. Bizarrely, it features an episode with pop star Rihanna playing a version of Marion Crane. That's enough of that. Later in the original film, Marion's boyfriend Sam and her sister Lila arrive at Bates Motel to look for her.
Suppose you want to run? We were going to try to make it straight to San Francisco, but we don't like the look of that sky. Looks like a bad day coming, doesn't it?
Okay. I'll take you to cabin 10.
Better sign in first, hadn't we?
No, that's not necessary.
In this deeply suspenseful check-in scene, we have a supreme example of the dynamic used in horror films over and over again. Is this a safe place? Stanley Kubrick uses the hotel scenario in The Shining. Jack and Wendy Torrance are to stay in the Overlook Hotel for the winter with their son Danny. The unfamiliar location and the scarcity of the other guests provides a chilling backdrop to Jack's breakdown. There are mysterious and sinister forces at work, but sometimes it's the guests themselves who can be the problem.
Here's Johnny!
Hospitality horror has become a trope, and if you're playing hospitality horror bingo,
Who's ready to play the game?
your best chance is Rocky Horror Picture Show. The car is broken down. It's nighttime. It's raining. A thunderstorm starts. The travelers ignore a warning sign and cross the threshold into the property. Will they find a warm welcome, or is this a place designed to corrupt and exploit them? I think you probably know the answer. Many cultures have strong hospitality codes. In ancient Greece, it's known as xenia, the code of conduct for the stranger. It's where we get the word xenophobic. Themes of welcoming the stranger appear in some of our most ancient stories. In Greek mythology, Zeus was the god responsible for how people treated strangers. In the tale of Sisyphus, founder of Ephyra, now Corinth, the initial reason for Sisyphus facing punishment is that he killed strangers who were visiting his city. He broke the Xenia code. In the stories of Theseus, we're told about the guest house of Procrustes, who promised his guests a bed that would fit them perfectly.
With these beds, you just fit.
The horror of his approach was that any traveller too short was stretched out, and any too tall having their limbs cut off to fit the mattress.
That's how you do it. How you murder your guests.
This gives us the phrase Procrustean bed. In feats mirroring those of Heracles before him, Theseus kills Procrustes by his own strategy. In the Xenia code, the stranger, especially if they are representative of a foreign power, should be treated with respect and dignity.
Persian or Greek, no man threatens a messenger.
But when the stranger refuses to honor his host,
You insult my queen.
well then,
You threaten my people with slavery and death. This is blasphemy. This is madness.
violence reigns.
Madness. This is Sparta!
Hospitality horror can be found in the fairy tales too. Many fairy tale characters walking through the woods find cabins in which they can rest from their journey. Hansel and Gretel are perhaps the most delighted when they discover a cottage made of gingerbread, food and shelter in one building. But the hostess is a witch who wants to eat them.
I see you got my invitation. You gotta be kidding me.
In The Silver Chair by C.S. Lewis, a man very familiar with myth and fairy tale, Eustace, Jill and Puddleglum the Marshwiggle are trudging through the snow and the dark when Jill sees lights in the distance. This time, even more obviously than when the travellers had seen them the night before, they were windows. Smaller windows that made one think deliciously of bedrooms, and larger windows that made one think of great halls with fires roaring on the hearth and hot soup or juicy sirloin smoking on the table. "Harfang!" exclaimed Scrub. Typically, Puddleglum undermines their excitement.
Oh, come on!
But they press on through the wind. They were thinking of baths and beds and hot drinks, and the idea of coming to Harfang too late and being shut out was almost unbearable. Needless to say, the hosts at Harfang do not turn out to be as hospitable as the travellers had hoped. So this essentially horror trope can be found in many places, and it can be seen in scripture too. Sinister, dark, and corrupted desires are the context for the biblical account of Sodom and Gomorrah. In Genesis 19, the men of Sodom refused to treat the guests of Lot, Abraham's nephew, with dignity and honor, desiring instead to sexually assault them. So why do the hospitality horror stories have such a broad impact? When we find deep mythological tropes, we should ask why they persist. Essentially, while these stories can exist in fiction and history, they have a deeper symbolic meaning. Hospitality horror works on the premise that life is a journey. There is a biblical argument for this, which I'll get into in a moment, but it's been noticed by others not holding to a Christian perspective too. This is one of Lakoff and Johnson's metaphors we live by. They argue in their 1982 book on cognitive linguistics that our brains are wired to think in metaphor, to map out the less concrete domain on a more tangible one. Another non-Christian account of life as journey and the persistence of these symbols can be found in Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey. Recorded in his 1958 work, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, the hero's journey takes the idea that a story is a journey through a series of stages and places. The hero leaves the known world and enters an unknown realm. They shift from being a local to being a stranger. Hospitality horror works on the basis that strangers need to find friends, and that when we're in need, we're vulnerable to attack. Perhaps the most enduring and impactful example of surprising hospitality is found in a story Jesus told known as the parable of the Good Samaritan. It's so culturally embedded that the Good Samaritan is a common phrase. Commenting on this passage, Augustine, a remarkable Christian teacher from the 4th century, taught that this parable should be taken allegorically. He says this: "A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho. Adam himself is meant. Jerusalem is the heavenly city of peace, from whose blessedness Adam fell. Jericho means the moon, and signifies our mortality, because it's born, waxes, wanes, and dies. Thieves are the devil and his angels, who stripped him, namely of his immortality, and beat him, by persuading him to sin, and left him half dead. Because insofar as man can understand and know God, he lives. But insofar as he is wasted and oppressed by sin, he is dead. He is therefore called half dead. The priest and the Levite who saw him and passed by signified the priesthood and ministry of the Old Testament, which could profit nothing for salvation. Samaritan means guardian, and therefore the Lord himself is signified by this name. The binding of the wounds is the restraint of sin. The inn is the church, where travellers returning to their heavenly country are refreshed after pilgrimage." In Stephen King's horror novel Misery, Paul Sheldon, an author, finds himself in a similar situation to the man going down to Jericho in Jesus' parable. He is battered and bruised by a car accident. He's rescued and welcomed in by a deranged fan named Annie Wilkes. She nurses him back to health. But of course, this is horror. As the story progresses, we discover that she's not the angel we hoped she'd be. Hospitality horror, then, is a picture of the church gone wrong. As Augustine says of Jesus' parable, the church is the inn, where the travellers are refreshed. And so in hospitality horror, we're confronted with the anti-church, a place where there is abuse and exploitation, communities which harm people, which leave them worse off than they were before. It's a terrible thing when people put their trust in institutions and communities not founded on the mercy, grace, and love of God. But it's perhaps even worse when those places call themselves church. Perhaps the most succinct example of the hospitality horror story is the Eagles song Hotel California. After feeling tired driving through the desert, our hero discovers that this hotel is a place of deep darkness, sexual depravity, and an unkillable beast. The demonic references are frequent and unnerving.
Last thing I remember, I was running for the door. I had to find a passage back to the place I was before. Relax, said the nightmare, we are programmed to receive. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave.
Hello, I hope you enjoyed that video. This channel is about the theology of storytelling, and so I make no apology whatsoever for returning to Scripture and to Jesus, the Good Samaritan. Please do remember that media consumption is optional. You are under no obligation to watch hospitality horror films. I've been Reformed mythologist Morgan Locke. I'm glad you were here, and you're free to leave.